to the Rod Chapel Show. Thanks for joining us, and this is a very special episode or series that we're going to talk about community issues during 2020. Whether it's the pandemic, demonstrations in the street, or just what we can do to make our communities better. We appreciate you joining us. We'll talk about how the law has an intersection with the individual and exactly what ground that stands on. I am honored to have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Adrian Hendricks. Thanks for being with us today.
It's my pleasure, man. I'm so glad to be on the show. It's been a little while.
Yep.
And, you know, every time we get together, you know, we're going to start some trouble.
We have to. We have to. Yes.
Absolutely.
As the saying goes, good trouble, right?
Good trouble. It's work to be done.
There's plenty of it, man.
That's right.
I just thought we might have a conversation about some of the current issues that are affecting our community, whether that's Jefferson City or the subset of Jefferson City that often we find ourselves in.
Right. And so, you know, just like how we talk a lot of times, what we see here in Jefferson City is going to be a microcosm of what we see across the country.
Yes.
And so the same issues that we have right here in good old Jefferson City, right? You see exacerbated in other communities, other major cities.
Yeah.
So some of the structural things that we know that we've got to address, and some of the organizing things that we've got to address,
yes.
They happen across the board. So hopefully we'll be able to inform, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then move people, mobilize.
That's right.
And so we've got a lot of moving pieces right now.
Oh yeah. And matter of fact, if you have time, we might do 2 segments.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm with it.
That'll work. Well, you know, what do they call it? Popcorn. When you're in some of these meetings, they say popcorn. They throw up an idea. COVID-19. Thoughts?
COVID-19. So I look at it from a couple of different ways. One, you have this global pandemic,
Yes.
right? You have all of the
Yes.
conversation coming out of D.C. You got all the undertone about what was going on with China, the intentionality of COVID-19.
Right.
And then you got the very personal side of COVID-19.
Yes.
This thing is killing Black and Latino families at what I think the last rate was 50%, twice as deadly.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so we have this whole exposure to the systemic issues of healthcare, health depravity amongst underprivileged, underserved families, Black communities, poor communities,
Yeah.
hospitals that need resources.
That's right.
And the impact of that.
Right.
And so all of these movements that we've had about healthcare,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Universal health care.
Medicaid expansion.
Yes. All those things now come to bear where we need that.
Right.
And it's a serious issue that we have to go vote on and mobilize on because our people are dying.
That's exactly right. And I think that's set up for the August 3rd election.
Yeah.
For Medicaid expansion. As I understand it, that is the single most important thing that a state government can do to ensure that its people of color, that its minority, that its underserved populations actually have a chance at having any kind of a resistance or an ability to fight off this COVID.
You know, I saw a T-shirt, health is wealth.
Yes.
And it didn't get real until this pandemic and this kind of scenario took shape where we know seriously health is wealth.
Yes.
And if we're not defending that vigorously, right? If we're not putting the policies in place that ensures that our communities and our people, our families are covered, that they have accessible health care, that is not a barrier, that we're legitimately deconstruction and tearing down anything that becomes a barrier to their overall health, because this is the fight.
That's right.
And I think it just got more real for people. You know, I know you've been on the front line and have been talking this same conversation. Everybody ignored it because there wasn't a serial killer out in the mist.
Right.
There wasn't COVID-19 out taking people out, right?
Yes.
And whether people think it's been hyped up or not, the reality is real people are dying.
Yes.
Real families are mourning.
Yep.
Real families are not getting closure because they can't go to the funeral home and send their loved ones off.
That's right.
And so it's disrupted our day-to-day operation. And regardless of what it has done in the medical field, the economic impact. So our states have been affected, our universities are affected, our small businesses are affected.
Desperately.
And so it lets us know how the system of our landscape, how the system of our communities are threatened.
Yes.
And what we have to do to go back and reimagine how to build a safe community.
That's right.
That's going to be pressing work.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and that's it's gonna have to keep going for a long time to come.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that you could walk outside of your house and catch something that will either kill you, put you on a ventilator, and even if you do get well, you might not be the same.
You might not be the same. You know,
It's incredible.
I was listening to a news article, and they were talking about the physical impact of recovery from COVID-19 and the damage that it has on the lungs, et cetera, et cetera. And so we know that this is so disruptive that we have to be vigilant in our protection. And so, you know, we've got a lot of moving pieces out here with protests, with people not, you know, wearing face masks, all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, what's happening is something that we're going to have to live with. I was listening to BBC this morning, and they were saying, you know, here it is, we're on the onset of something that you might have to live with for the rest of your life.
Right, yeah, right, like
Imagine
Zika,
that.
right, yes.
Imagine that COVID-19 is a conversation that might not go away.
Boy.
That there's something about this environment that will always require you to address. And it now changes how we do business, how we do education. All of those things have been disrupted. And so it's a little scary.
It is. It really is.
It's a little scary. And so, you know, here we have organizations like the NAACP and Faith Voices and others that are saying, what are we doing about the leadership of our country and the leaders of our community? Right. How are we moving towards a strategy that is concerned with our plight?
Desperately. That's right. Yeah.
And how do we mobilize people to get beyond not just the protests, because we got to protest, right? We see that, but address policy. Right. Because now we got to go to the drawing board and bring policy conversations to the table and hold people accountable.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Hold people accountable to ensure that we all have what we need so that your children can be happy and my children can be happy.
Amen.
You understand?
And alive too, right? And alive.
Cannot have it this, you know, we've got to do that work.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And this is such a time where we see lots of stress, lots of trauma. You know, you think about COVID-19, worldwide pandemic, nobody wants to die. You're part of a demographic, part of a demographic that is dying quicker than anybody else, the most at risk. There is no plan, right? So the state health department, they didn't really have a plan. Social distancing, no idea that it was going to hit African Americans in the numbers that it did, but they suspected, and then when faced with that reality, didn't have anything that they could do about it. Right. You know, and by the same token, though, we have criminal justice concerns, and that's led to a number of demonstrations in our city and many other cities around the state and country. You know, in the time of a pandemic. Right. You know, one of the questions that I talked about the other day was, how is it that people are coming out to protest in a pandemic? And the way I tried to explain it, and tell me if you agree, was that here we are, most certainly in the middle of a pandemic, and everybody needs to be taking it seriously, right? We wash our hands, we're going to use the hand sanitizer, we're going to stay 6 feet away. This is a big table, by the way, for our viewing audience. We're going to wear masks at the appropriate times, but you know, yet and still, we're out in the streets with, even in Jefferson City, 1,000 people. Right. You know,
and so that becomes, you know, a launch pad for people to realize just how serious society is, just how serious this movement is.
That's right.
You know, I want to go back to, you know, again, the COVID-19 conversation, the national conversation, the World Health Organization conversation, but then I'm still looking for, where's the task force? Where's the Missouri task force that is addressing this issue as it relates to protecting African American and Latino citizens?
Yes.
Why are we still immobilized, waiting for CDC and other organizations, and not necessarily mimicking or partnering with them in specific ways to make sure that these communities are being addressed? Yes. And so, you know, everyone's saying, well, the problem's in St. Louis, and it's in the North County, and we'll send some resources there. But this shows you really how our government and how our systems are going to respond. And in this case, we are seeing a system that is responding towards a threat to its citizens, and we need to evaluate how good are they doing? What grade are they getting as a response to the unique issue that is threatening our safety and our overall health?
Now, Dr. Hendricks, you've taught classes before, right?
Right.
And in the class, the students frequently raise their hand?
Yeah.
I have an answer. I got an answer.
What's your answer?
They get an F. Most of our elected leaders get a straight F.
Yeah.
There's a failure to respond. They didn't even turn in the assignment.
Yeah.
They have a strategic plan on what they're going to do on so many other levels.
Yeah.
If there's a tornado, we know what we're going to do. If there's a public health issue. But wait a minute. We left the whole segment out of the public health sphere.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
just
And that's
didn't do it.
concerning.
Yeah.
That's more than concerning.
Yeah.
And again, it says to me, we've got to mobilize the vote. We've
Yes.
got to put together an agenda that is strategic and that is comprehensive.
Right.
We run into these issues. Our job as leaders and educators and activists and liberators is to bring the issue forward, get with the elders, get with the team,
Yes.
find out what are the best options and strategies, and work with those who are trying to push legislation and policy forward,
Yeah.
and then hold accountable those who are not, who are responsible to do that work.
That's right.
And so where are we? Right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
We're caught right here between these two, these bodies of people that may not be doing as much as they could be, and very specific to our individual situation.
Right.
And so I've seen a lot of responses now that it's hitting, the national global news.
Yes.
Now that the protest, everybody's protesting, so I see statements of support, I see those kind of things.
Yes.
But we're like 3 months in, right?
Yeah.
That should have been an immediate response and an immediate action.
Right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And then talking about holding people accountable and the ability to do that, fundamental as part of our social contract. John Locke talked about that.
Yeah.
You have rights and privileges as a citizen.
Right.
One of those is voting.
Right.
There is a move that is still being pushed forward to disenfranchise voters.
Right.
And it's going to disproportionately affect African Americans and Hispanics and people of color more than anybody else.
Right.
One of the latest measures that I've read about was Amendment 3, just passed out of the legislature. Now, it's funny how everybody was afraid to do their work in the legislature because of the pandemic. But when they got in there, they passed a bunch of stuff that didn't have anything to do with addressing the pandemic.
Right.
That was outside of the scope of the budget.
Right.
They passed Senate Bill 600 to further the criminalization practices within the state, to make those harsher with mandatory minimums,
Right.
even when we had laws for the same crimes on the books.
Yeah.
But Amendment 3 does this deal where it literally says that we are not going to count people for purposes of redistricting.
Right. And that's something.
Isn't it?
And so, I think, I like the fact that you have this vault of information, right? Because it says to me, one, we need to find ways to mobilize information.
Yes.
Right? We need to
Yes.
do a better job at telling that story, getting that concrete information about what's happening in the legislature, what's happening in the House and the Senate, and making sure that our people are aware,
Yes,
right?
that-
That
that's
needs to
right.
be systemic.
Yes.
That needs to be maybe a grassroots, maybe we need to cultivate an organization just for disseminating information that relates to our issues.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And then we need to, we need to build these platforms.
Right.
We have to build these spaces where the people that are most impacted by these scenarios have voice, have placement.
Yes.
I was on a call yesterday.
Okay.
And this was a national call for churches. There's a BPAC
Oh,
call,
sure.
Political Action Committee call, where they're establishing a place and a way for us to build our own infrastructure for collecting our own resources, collecting our own data,
Wow.
collecting our own listserv, mobilizing the vote, owning the information.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so we've been working with, previously, you would get that from the Democratic Party
Right.
or the Republican Party. Now there's a movement that's saying, no, we want to hold our own information.
Yes.
We want to mobilize the way to reach our own constituents and inform them and mobilize them and make that a part of our activity, our political, social activity.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm saying, yeah, let's go.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
right.
right. Well, Kansas City's got the Freedom Inc., right? It's primarily a Democratic organization, but organized towards ensuring that the people in the city have political power, a voice on important issues.
That's right.
To have one of those statewide would be incredible.
Oh yeah, and so there were 300 people on the Zoom call.
Whoa.
All clergy leaders from all over the country. Jeremiah Wright was on, Bishop Noel Jones was on. I mean, McBride was on. People that were part of the Ferguson movement.
Yeah.
Very, very diverse group of young and old, but all a part of that movement. But what it said to me was that we have to rethink how we do strategy. In light of COVID-19, everything going virtual.
Yes.
Now we've got to look at how do we do virtual organizing, virtual planning, virtual systemic things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's
and
right.
what you're seeing in the social media platform is a lot of hub groups, right? Cluster groups that have great conversation, great interest, great energy.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And now we have to find a way to collectively bring them together so that you can work within your strengths, and then the collective can still find a way to make improvements in their region and then duplicate that model.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly right.
Duplicate that model, build that system so that from city to city, we know that we have that hub and we have that communication line, because we're dealing with the same types of problems.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk in the next segment about how we're going to bring some of those ideas right back on home.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the Rod Chappell Show. As you can see, Reverend Dr. Adrian Hendricks has a wealth of knowledge. He has the ability to organize, to talk to the people, and a prescription for what's coming to tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on this segment, and we'll see you again in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Jessica Ash Schulte with Dreams to Reality. Dreams to Reality is a not-for-profit agency in Jefferson City serving women across mid-Missouri. Our mission is to help low-income women meet their employment goals and build self-confidence by providing appropriate interview and business apparel, motivation, and follow-up support. We serve clients referred to us by many local agencies, and all services are free of charge. Not only do we provide appropriate interview and work attire for women seeking and retaining employment, but we also provide a more comprehensive personal image consultation to ensure clients are ready and confident as they strive to meet their employment goals. Dreams to Reality helps women enhance their potential to be gainfully employed and achieve self-sufficiency to support themselves and their families. For more information about our services or to see how you can support our mission, visit our website or like us on Facebook. Dreams to Reality is proud to be a United Way partner agency.
Hi, welcome to the Rod Chappell Show. This is part 2 of a great series that we have talking about issues happening right now. Lots of times we talk about how the law intersects with people in their common and everyday lives. This is a policy discussion that has real implications for people, and we are blessed to have with us a special guest, Reverend Dr. Adrian Hendricks. Thanks for coming back.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, in the last segment, we were talking about COVID-19, some of the demonstrations that have happened, and an interplay of health and policy in our lives.
Yeah.
You know, the policy implications from how we are policed and how we're going to govern the police as citizens have really come into question.
Yeah.
We've seen that in the streets, and that's been expressed in many different ways. One of the arguments is to defund the police. Have you looked at that issue?
I'm looking at the issue right now, and I think, again, what we're really dealing with is people who have been shocked by a disruption in the system and then shocked by a long-standing issue that is just mounted up too much.
Right.
Enough is enough.
That's right.
And so as taxpayers, right, we give our blood, sweat, and tears, we do our work,
Yes.
we are taxed. That tax fund is supposed to provide for certain amenities and community, and one of those is safety.
Right.
Keep me safe. It's not to abuse me. It's not to make me feel as a second-class citizen.
Yeah.
It's not to make me feel like I don't belong somewhere. It is to provide safety and resources to protect my family and business.
Yes.
Not just business,
Right.
but my family and business. And
Yeah.
so because the whole police concept came out of this slave trade, slave escape history,
Yes.
the role of the police department has always been to catch and control primarily African Americans.
Right.
And it has moved out of that history into where we have it now.
Yes.
And so the conversation that's going forward now is how do we enable a system that is for our interests? What type of new idea? We don't have to have police.
Right.
Which is a very shocking thing to say.
It is.
I've always grown up to think that police were an essential part of society.
Right.
Now the pushback is maybe there's another way.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so even as we've looked at issues over time, and you go back to education issues with truancy, how students have been policed in schools,
Right.
how students have been made into criminals,
Yeah.
the school to prison pipeline.
Right.
A lot of those common denominators has been how not only the student and the community has intersected with law enforcement, but how law enforcement has positioned themselves with community.
Right.
And so that makes it a very viable discussion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the problems is when you have imagine you have a carpenter who's going to come out to your house, but he's only got one tool, and it turns out it's a hammer, right? Everything is going to look like a nail.
Yeah.
Far too often, I think that our peace officers, right, are called to handle situations, whether it has to do with mental health issues, whether it has to do with substance abuse issues, and they are only offered this tool, right? We need other programs to further provide a safety net for our communities, and most importantly, I think, for our citizens, that allow for something else other than incarceration.
That's right.
You know, I know that many of the mental health facilities during the Reagan era were defunded,
Right.
you know, and you ended up with a lot of these folks back out on the street, and then a lot of generations coming up since then that can't get services they need access to.
Right.
And I've talked with officers here and around the state who lament having to deal with people who have verified issues in a way that they are not prepared to, right? And you can get some training to try to de-escalate and try to move some people around into a different frame of mind. But frankly, I think that we need to rebuild up that net. And maybe that's what some of the defunding is supposed to go to, right?
Yeah, you know, Rod, I hear, and as I've looked at my own experience, one of the things Stephen Covey says was, first seek to understand, then to be understood.
Right.
And when we have interactions with police, they are not trying to understand. They come with their perspective,
Well, sure.
and then move from there. And so we know that there's other strategies that work. If you understand a people, you empathize, sympathize, understand the culture, the language, the intent, their placement, then you have the ability to be more effective.
That's right. That's right.
And so it really does give us a space to say, what does our community need, and who or what systems should be in place to bring that forward.
Right.
And I think that's a legitimate space to go to the table.
Absolutely. Because we do have some legitimate concerns, too.
Absolutely.
The vehicle stops report comes out.
Yeah.
20 years worth of data showing that if you're black or brown, you get stopped more often than anybody else.
Yeah.
Almost by 100% if you're black.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of almost all over the state. Some places it's much worse than that. Some places it's a little less than that.
But consider how that has moved into our culture as parents. You're a father.
Yes.
And so I remember my father telling me, when you get in the car and you're driving and you see the police, take your hat off.
Right. That's right.
Don't turn your head when you drive.
Yeah.
and so I would get on my friends when we're driving in the car, and especially when I came to Jeff City.
Yes.
You're driving in the car, you drive straight, your partner turns around and looks to see, and then they whip around. You know? And so it's those things that have been ingrained in us to such a degree where, as a matter of fact, it's a book concept that I'm working on. There's social and psychological chains that have been put on our own psyche.
Right on.
This psychological warfare that we've been dealing with, this trauma that we've been dealing with for years. And you think about how does that affect our overall health?
Right.
As black males are dying before females, before white females and white males, et cetera.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so that toll is showing up in our lives, and the depravity.
Yes. Oh, that's right. That's
the fatality.
Right. And you end up with stuff like high blood pressure.
Right.
You know.
Where did that come from?
Come on, right? You're stressed out all the time.
That's right.
You know, you're in this period where your hormones are racing. You're thinking, hey, is now it? Is this the problem?
Right.
And that's an interesting point, Doc, because when you think about the issues that fathers have to face, there's a lot of commonality just on base of being a father, right? So when the kids get in the car, you need them to be safe, not run into somebody else, watch out for the other driver. When they go to the pool, take a buddy, because it's not safe to swim alone.
That's right.
Right? When you go to school, is everybody looking out? Are we making sure we're getting our homework done in the right way?
Right.
But if you're an African-American father, there's a whole different set of circumstances.
That's exactly right. It's compounded.
Every one of them.
And so, you know, this idea of what it is to be a black man in these United States in this time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a giant issue because, one, we have to acknowledge we are here.
Right.
We are 100% male, 100% human, 100% valid. Our voice counts, right? And so there's no space in this new era to legitimize our presence.
Right.
What we have to find is a way to help other people, if they need to understand, understand that clearly.
Yes.
And then you have all of this social pressure. And so being, you know, African American, being in this position, carries these burdens, knowing that there's crazy everywhere.
Yes,
right?
yes, that's the truth.
You go to protest, crazy is there.
It's there. And it's not limited to one color. It comes in all colors, ages, sizes.
Crazy is there. And so when you know, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I'm saying when we think about the things that are in front of us, how we do organizing is now critical.
Right.
How we do communication is now critical.
Yes.
How we do sharing of thoughts and understanding values is now critical. And how we look at the NAACP and Faith Voices.
Yes.
I put together a group, a nonprofit, the Center for Change and Community Life, just to address some of these other issues. And I see that we have so many other people and people groups that are looking at organizing and finding ways to build that platform.
Yes.
Because we know that we need it. And it's not going to be one group that will address and fix all the issues.
That's right.
The church cannot fix all the issues.
Right. The NAACP can't do it either.
Can someone say amen?
Amen.
Right?
Yeah.
But we're a part of that spoke.
Yes.
Right?
That's
Our faith community has gotten us through the 60s. It's preserved us through even to now.
Yes.
And even as we look at those other entities that we know that we need, right? And those entities that we're not necessarily comfortable with, but we know that it's growing, such as the Second Amendment groups that are arming, because Black America is arming, and that's a very touchy conversation.
That's right.
It makes me nervous a little bit.
That's right.
I just got to be honest.
No, it's the truth. It's the truth. And frankly, it doesn't really matter who it is, right? Because when I saw I know that there were a bunch of folks that came up because they were opposed to Missouri being closed. They wanted it to open up. Yeah. And came up with their assault rifles and things.
Yes, they did.
And then went walking up and down High Street.
Yes, they did.
You know, I know a lot of people that went home.
Yeah.
You know, went home that day because it's weird.
That's right.
You know, and it's no less than some sort of a military occupation.
Right.
The idea that there should be armed citizen militias out somehow patrolling or running around. I know that those ideas are being floated, but I think we have to be very, very careful with what's going to happen.
The Ahmaud Arbery case is a very real scenario here.
That's right.
You know, and so even as we're looking at people having their right to protect themselves and to defend themselves, which I definitely agree with, and the right to, be in public spaces, which I agree with, we have to have a better place where we as community and as society understand those social norms, which is, again, why we are protesting now.
That's exactly
because those social norms are being violated. I can't breathe has become a national and now global mantra.
Right.
I spoke about it this past Sunday, where this concept of being choked is not a new thing. No. But we have been feeling this pressure, and we've been feeling this issue for years. So now that we have this reality, it's time to deal with it.
That's right.
It's time to deal with it.
That's exactly right. You know, we're closing out this segment, but we may do one more if you've got time.
I got time.
All right.
I got time and energy because when you really look at a lot of the backside of protest has got to be planning.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's got to be a place where we have organized and thought through enough to say, what are our demands?
Right.
What are the things that we ask for? What are the things that have been stifling off and, taking our resources?
Yes.
You always look at where the money goes.
That's right.
Right?
That's
and where
right.
the money's not going.
Well, sure.
Where
sure.
is the portion of those funds, if we did do defunding, how do we strengthen support organizations for our youth, education platforms for our next generation, vocation agendas so that we can build plumbers and electricians, and et cetera, et cetera. That's a very healthy place for us to look at how do we establish the next generation.
Absolutely.
Because there's plenty of work to be done.
You're right. You're right. And when it comes down to it, Reverend Dr. Hendricks' point about we've got to listen. We've got to be able to hear what other people are talking about. In this next segment, we're going to talk about some of the issues that can be raised in our own community to make sure that we're having the right conversations and getting at the right end. Thanks for joining us on The Rod Chappell Show.
I'm Shelley Locke with Child Care Aware of Missouri. We're committed to helping families find child care and early learning programs that meet their needs. Finding the right child care or preschool is one of the most important decisions parents make. We help parents understand the types of programs available and the state's licensing rules. We also provide tips on what to look for when you visit possible programs for your child. Call us today at 866-892-3228 or visit us online at mo.childcareaware.org. Child Care Aware of Missouri, Missouri's most trusted child care resource.
Hi, welcome back to the Rod Chappell Show. Thanks for joining us. We've had a fantastic series of discussions with Reverend Dr. Adrian Hendricks talking about this new position that so many communities find themselves in, where we're asking questions about why we're here and is what we're doing working. In this segment, we're going to talk about some things that can be done locally, some ideas and issues that need to be raised. Reverend Dr. Hendricks, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. So glad to be here, man.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. If there were, now let me say this, you may have some friends that have asked, I see what's happening, civil rights violations in multiple levels, many spheres, not just the criminal justice system, not just the civil justice system, but in the education and healthcare and the outcomes we've seen with COVID-19. Right. What can we as a community, what can I as an individual do to make a difference?
Well, Rod, I like that question, and I like the opportunity to help us to look at this really holistically.
Yes.
Because as a community that is going to go through change, and COVID-19 is just an introduction to change.
Right.
The atrocities that are happening to black males in America, it confronts us with an opportunity to change.
Yes.
And so, you teach in business about cultivating a culture of a learning organization.
Okay.
And so we have to be a learning society. We have to be a society or a community that is willing to learn and to adopt and to change as necessary.
Yes.
That needs to be our day-to-day operation.
Right.
So not emergency town hall meetings, not emergency activity. It becomes a culture. It becomes a way of living.
Yes.
That we are engaged in dialogue that's always about progressive, healthy ways to better our community, right?
Right.
So a lot of times we get caught up in just the business, the business of the community, but not in creating the culture of the community. Who do we want to be?
Right.
And so I think that's the first starting point, where we are intentional about how we organize. We're intentional about the idea of diversity and inclusion, right?
Right.
We put together what's called the Jefferson City Area Youth Advisory Council. And the whole concept was to bring everybody that touches youth programs together so that we can have a collective conversation about this audience. Yes. We can do programming, we can do building, resources, et cetera, to mobilize a successful holistic agenda for the youth of our community.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Why we're not doing that in other ways?
It would make too much sense, wouldn't
right?
it? Yeah.
And so, we know the functionality of city and administration and nonprofits and universities. We know that they all have their role, but there's got to be a place where we have this overarching concept, right?
Yes.
So that's first off. Yeah. Second off, we know that we have to have detailed plans about the issues. We have to address the problem.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so that takes communication. And what's been a burden here is that because we've been violated so many times.
Yes.
we're not coming to your meeting.
Right. Yes, yes, yes.
We're not coming to your meeting. We're not coming to your meeting.
That's
we don't want it. We don't feel safe there.
Yeah.
We're not coming to your town halls. We don't feel heard there.
Yep.
There were racial issues and a lot of discussions over the last 2 years. Our public school went and did a tour, right? A listening tour.
That's right.
They set a committee together.
Uh-huh.
And the general population that looked at that was saying, we're not involved.
Right.
We're not involved because we don't trust the system. And then when those people were put into place, they didn't look like us.
Yes.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
None of the administrators.
That's a real problem, especially when you're looking at issues that are to disenfranchised families, low-income families, minority families, and then you want to stick to 11%. Come on now.
Yes.
You want to build a task force on that issue and then not really address that issue with the people from that community.
Right.
And so that's another place where we have to really change the idea of what we're dealing with, because if it was another issue, we would expect to get the resources and the right people who can inform us on how to be effective.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just doing the song and dance.
That's right.
And we're not being effective.
And nobody's got time for that.
Right.
No.
And so I know you see the same thing.
Absolutely.
You know, you see the same situation. And then, of course, I can't stress enough, we've got to do the census.
Yes.
We've got to get the right information to have the right resources.
Say it again.
Right?
Yes.
We've got to mobilize churches and strengthen churches. I think that's a critical part.
Absolutely.
So from Bishop Howard, shout out to Bishop Howard and Hardin and Weston and Sudeth and Webb and so on and so forth. We have to give them the tools and the capacity to touch their audience.
Right.
Because we need every vote.
Yes.
And we need to have skilled leadership that has the ability to organize and communicate and then give us enough space so that we can reach out and get some more support.
That's right.
Because that's kind of the movement that and then we got to go vote.
Yes, yes. No, you were absolutely
got to vote,
right.
man.
I mean, ultimately.
Vote aggressively.
yes.
Vigorously.
Your life may depend on it.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
literally.
Right.
Depend
that's
on
right.
it. Yeah. Yeah, the ability of citizens to control what's happening in their community is not just limited to a complaint box, right, or some administrative process at City Hall or at the state level. Ultimately, it's up to the citizens to determine whether or not their leaders are effective, whether the plans that they're making make any sense, right? And then to see how those things played out, right? So, and nobody's supposed to have a crystal ball, but there should be a litmus test to determine whether or not, you know, whether it's the mayor or somebody on the city council or the governor or any of those other statewide seats like the Secretary of State, whether they're actually doing the work of the people.
Right. And so here's what I'm hearing on a national platform from the HipHop Generation.
Okay.
Right. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s, you know, when Colors was going on, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the whole gang banging time frame. And so that group has grown up to the point where now we're looking at how to be political and how to be aggressive and how to mobilize our power.
Yes.
And so we're saying there has to be that conversation where every time we see an issue, that the people that are on the other side of the table know that we're wielding a power to vote you out.
Right.
If we have judges, if we have prosecutors, if we have administrators, if we have any person that has a place where they are not cooperating and thinking about this community, we're going to vote you out.
That's right.
That if we're not engaged, and so here's the part where if we're not looked at seriously, that's our fault.
Right. That's exactly right. Yep.
If we're not looked at legitimately, seriously, as a weapon,
that's right,
that has the ability to impact your day-to-day, then that's our fault. But what we have now is the momentum.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is Faith Voices, the NAACP, organizations that are committed to change, we have to have a place to vote. We need to hold a summit.
Right.
We need to have a forum.
Yes.
We're in the capital city. It's a great place for the city of Jefferson to pull together Kansas City and St. Louis in collective conversations about the state of Black America for Missourians. Right. And to host those kinds of discourse so that we can have a place to really vet out what should be going on for my kids' generation, because we know that it's going to take a little time.
It is.
But we ought to be doing the work.
Well, that's exactly right. If we don't lay that groundwork, it's never going to get done.
That's right.
You know.
That's right.
And there's some tools that are coming around. We'll be sure and post one of them on the website and hopefully in this video. But it allows you to sign up for an absentee ballot from home.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was just about to bring you back to this, because, you know, our president, our president is saying that there's so much crime related to the absentee ballot, and it is something that we should not trust. And again, I think maybe you should help us to clarify that message between what issues and barriers the absentee ballot eliminates, and how it empowers us to really position our conversation where it counts, and how to do that ahead of time so that we're not, you know, behind the 8 ball.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. No, I'm with you, and that will definitely be a discussion that we will have. We will facilitate that throughout the community, and I think that a broadband approach to it, because as long as we know that COVID-19 is here, here to stay, is going to be here for a while, that in these elections that are coming up, that we should be smart in how we position ourselves. Not only politically in terms of who it is that we support and don't support, what issues that we are in favor of, and what issues like Amendment 3 that we're not in favor of, but also to make sure that we're here to vote next time.
That's right.
And so you don't have to be a senior to be able to vote with an absentee ballot at this point. You have to be at risk. Now, the CDC tells me, and you may have seen the same memo, if you're an African American, you are at higher risk.
You are at risk.
That's right. You are more likely to die than anybody else.
Then that's something.
That's enough.
That should be enough.
That is enough.
Is it enough?
Yes. Yes. And you know what else? I also believe as a part of my faith, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this one, that I don't have to die to go vote.
That's right.
God doesn't want me to die.
Right.
No, that's not part of this.
Right.
So I need to preserve myself.
That's right.
So I got to be smart.
That's right.
Yes.
That's
yes.
right. And so I think, you know, again, I think that where we're fighting in this new generation, this new concept of fighting for this justice, addressing these social inequities, bringing equity to the table in every platform.
Yes.
You know, again, if we're living in a community that does not support us, why do we support you?
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And let's just make it clear.
Yeah.
If I come and patron your business and your establishment, and you don't stand up for my placement, then that's saying something about how you view me.
Right.
And that also should say something about how I view you.
Yes.
And where I support you economically. And so, you know, a lot of those discussions that are going forward now are about how do we, you know, mobilize our dollars, how do we strengthen, you know, again, the middle and low income class are disrupted.
Yes. Oh, big time. Yeah.
Essential workers, those that are being cut off and laid off, and you know, July 1.
That's right.
We got another problem coming.
Yep.
Right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so those are very real situations, and so now it's saying to me, we have to have some ownership and begin some dialogue about how do we strengthen ourselves, how do we strengthen our communities, how do we seed entrepreneurships, how do we support, how do we mobilize, how do we raise up the next generation of leaders, and then galvanize those support pieces that need to be there so they can be sustainable.
Yes.
And so that's a lot to do, which means we need a lot of help.
We do. We do.
Because Rod can't do everything.
No, thank you. Bless you.
Or be everywhere.
Right. And nor can you, right?
Neither can I.
Yeah.
And neither am I.
Just not possible, right?
I'm not going to do it. Every call don't get a yay.
That's right.
You know, we have to be wise.
Yeah. So when folks are like, what can we do? Join an organization, right? Come to your church home.
Yeah.
And whether that's your church, Rev Hendricks, or whether that's the NAACP or Missouri Faith Voices or the ACLU, whatever organization that you deem is valuable in your community, come in. And chances are they want to hear from you.
That's right.
You know, you're going to have ideas. Those folks are going to have ideas as they walk in the door, or be able to act with action and intent on plans that have just been sitting for lack of people.
Right.
You know.
And so here's my rebuttal. Don't complain. You got to get in the game.
Right.
Don't complain. Don't complain.
Right.
Get in the game. Get off the sideline.
Yep.
You know, if this is the last dance, be at least Pippen. You know, if you can't be Jordan. Be a strong number 2.
That's right. Yeah.
Because what we really need, those that are in the work, we know we're doing 4 and 5 jobs.
Yes.
And so we need to be able to designate and to help other people take and carry some of that burden,
right? That's right.
In the church, in the organizations.
Yes.
And then it's up to the leadership of those organizations to communicate, because we're really working for the same agenda. We want to see our community better off.
That's right.
Whether that's through ACLU and legislation issues, or that's through whatever.
Yes.
We want to see our families better off. And this is where it is.
That's right.
And anyone that's not a partner to that,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
We have to help them understand that history is going to tell this story.
Thank you.
History is going to tell this story.
Oh, yeah.
This story is being told.
That's right.
And whether you're on the right side of that conversation or not,
right? Yeah.
is going to stain your legacy, or you'll be an advocate for truth, an advocate for justice, and really the American way.
That's right.
Which should be for everybody.
That is for everybody.
Right, okay.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be one of those footnotes like Jim Crow Greitens, right? Passing the most restrictive Jim Crow bill in the United States of our lifetimes. Right?
That's
you don't
right.
want to be that guy.
That's right.
Yeah, no, we can be good people who can be looked up to not only in their families, but in their communities, in their churches, as somebody who lived a life that was valuable, and valuable through service to other people.
Right.
You know?
And so, we have an opportunity now on June 19th and 20th.
Yes.
We're going to celebrate Juneteenth, the emancipation of blacks in the United States.
Yep.
We have a virtual program, but really what this is about is bringing us together collectively, showcasing who we are, sharing our businesses and our programs, our partners, our organizations, and giving us a rally point, right? A local rally point to say, this is where you can fit in.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Bringing a place to uphold and give our speakers, our organizers and leaders a place to speak to us.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then share this idea that we can collectively move forward.
Right.
And what does that look like in the year? Now, we have this conversation every February.
Right.
Every February, we're with it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's Pan-African. March, not so much, right? And so to me, that means, when we look at cultural diversity and we look at festivals, where's our festival?
Right.
Right. Now, let's not, we have diversity festivals downtown. We have a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And it shouldn't just be tied to the university.
Right, that's true.
Right? And it shouldn't just be tied to slavery.
Yes, it's true. Yes.
It should be tied to the building of community and the establishment of culture.
Right.
And so we're saying that those are opportunities for us to think about, how do we build this kind of life that we want to have that celebrates inclusion for not only us and others.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
But we just need our space.
That's right.
We need to have presence.
Yeah.
And so those are things that we should have solicited volunteers for and work for.
That's right.
The tornadoes taught us a lot. Right?
In what way?
So when the tornado came through Jeff City, it moved poor people out of communities. The resources were pushed out on the outskirts. We saw that there was a lot of systemic issues between the have and the resources and the have-nots, the communication lines and the way that we worked together, who took lead in the way that we worked together, who took ownership of those responsibilities and resources. All of those things spoke to where are we in the discussion.
Right.
And so that has been eye-opening.
Yes.
Now it's up to us to fix that.
That's right.
Right?
That's
right.
right.
So we need others to get on these committees. We need them to be influential and then to continue to put pressure on these organizations who are still taking our dollars.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
Our donations and so on and so forth, but then not including us in the dissemination of those resources.
Right.
County dollars, city grant money, federal dollars. Right? Listen, come on.
All
private. So there's a lot of room for us to really look at how do we change and reshape our culture, our community for the better.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, and that calls to mind, actually tomorrow night, we're going to have a Zoom town hall through the NAACP. One of the, or two of the folks that are coming are Steve Crowell, the city administrator, and Mayor Turgeon.
All right.
And so we will hear from them about services and resources at the city and the opportunities for us to participate.
Right.
And what I would love to see is not only people taking part of the conversation, but to take hold of some of those opportunities.
Yeah.
There are boards and commissions that we can
right.
participate in. There's lots of valuable work being done in our community that's touching our lives and our fellow citizens of Jefferson City and Cole County that we could be a part of.
And not only that, if you know, there's some places where we can be a part of, but maybe we need to create some new.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Maybe we need to have some new pieces and some new places created that are established and put on place. I'm glad that Mayor Turgeon is going to be involved. We've talked about and support having, you know, this conversation where our mayor gets to speak to these issues as we should, right? And see our partners and friends from administration and city positions and the, you know, law enforcement, et cetera, be in relation and in communication with a now grieving community of people.
Well, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so we know we've got that to deal with as we still deal with the common issues like gun violence, with the death of young brother Pitts.
Yes,
you know,
so sad.
There's a lot of other pieces that we know we have to do better with.
Yes.
But it starts with that communication.
Well, that's right. And part of that, and it's a slight tangent, but having programs for the youth, you know, engaging the youth and building skills. I know that you're spearheading a photo contest.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that.
All right. So, you know, as the state specialist of 4-H and youth development for Missouri, a part of what I do in the state is to put together programs for underserved, impoverished families and children across the state. And so we put together through the lens of Lincoln as a social justice platform. And so the whole idea is that we'll have programs that address social justice issues, and this one happens to be COVID-19, so we have a COVID-19 contest. And so we're partnering with the NAACP and other organizations to share across the state this idea of how young people are being affected and how they see this issue. Right? And so as we teach the skill through, you know, technology, through photography, we're also bringing to light a place of conversation, a place of unpacking, this is what's happening in my world. And really engaging young people to be able to say, this is what I'm experiencing, this is how I feel about it, this is how I see it. And then when you move that subject from COVID-19 to say police brutality, protesting, the impact of poverty in your community, all those things, the drug epidemic, all those other issues, it becomes a place for us to have a platform to discuss these issues, to engage young people in a way that's tangible, and then give them some sense of belonging, some sense of this is what I can do to help and bring exposure.
Wow. We will bring that information. We'll provide that as a part of this program so they'll be able to see it on the screen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Reverend Hendricks, you're talking about listening to young people as a way to solve problems in the community, to ensure that tragedies like the death of young Mr. Pitts don't have to be replicated in the same way, to allow communities to come together, to build and be stronger, regardless of some of the external differences that have kept folks apart for way too long. A God-given characteristic, whether it's your color or your sex, your ability or disability, shouldn't be something that separates people. We've got to brace and embrace those things that are inherent as to human nature. And so I think that we've talked about how to make communities better, where individuals can participate, and even some very specific programs that people can be involved in. Thanks for being with us on the Rod Chappell Show, and we're looking forward to come back, to Reverend Dr. Hendricks coming back, because frankly, there's more that we have to talk about.
I'm sure.
Thanks for being with us today.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.